He hid as a footman to test his bride. Then her words broke him. 1968. The December frost clung to the windows of Ashford Manor like lace curtains made of ice. Outside, the bare oaks of Fairfax County, Virginia, stood sentinel in the twilight, their branches etched black against a sky the color of steel wool. Inside, William Ashford III stood before the library fireplace in his family's estate, 29 years old, and caught between duty and doubt. His father had been dead for 3 months. The funeral had been appropriately solemn, attended by senators and industrialists who'd known William Ashford II as a titan of East Coast manufacturing. Now the weight of the Ashford fortune, textile mills, real estate holdings, and a seat on half a dozen corporate boards, rested squarely on William's shoulders, and with it came his father's final dictate: marry Catherine Hartwell before the year ended. Before we continue, I'd love to hear from you. Please subscribe to the channel and drop a comment letting me know where in the world you're watching from. Your support means everything, and I can't wait to share this journey with you. Catherine was everything a man in his position was supposed to want. 26, elegant, educated at Radcliffe, with impeccable breeding. Their families had known each other for generations, moved in the same circles of country club dinners and charity galas. She was beautiful in that understated way that old money preferred. Honey blonde hair, always perfectly coiffed, pearls at her throat, posture that suggested finishing school and cotillion lessons. But William had barely spent time alone with her. Their courtship had been orchestrated through formal dinners and supervised gatherings, conversations about weather and mutual acquaintances, while their mothers looked on approvingly. He'd proposed because it was expected. She'd accepted because it was prudent. The wedding was set for December 28th, just 2 weeks away. You're thinking about calling it off? His sister Margaret stood in the doorway, martini in hand, cigarette balanced between 2 fingers. At 32, she'd shocked the family by refusing to marry at all, choosing instead to work as an editor at a Washington publishing house. Their mother still referred to it as Margaret's phase. "I'm thinking about whether I know her at all," William said quietly. Margaret crossed the Persian rug to stand beside him. Beyond the windows, the ground staff was lighting the pathway lamps, small beacons in the gathering dark. "So get to know her. You have 2 weeks. How? Every time we're together, it's a performance. For her family, for ours, for society pages." He turned away from the window. "I need to know who she really is, what she values, how she treats people when no one important is watching. Then stop being important." Margaret took a long drag from her cigarette. Stop being William Ashford III, heir to the Ashford fortune, be someone she'd never perform for. The idea took root immediately, wild and impossible. "You're insane." "Probably." She smiled, sharp as broken glass. "But father's will doesn't take effect until you're married. Right now, you're technically still free. And we're short-staffed for the Christmas season. Mother's been complaining about it for weeks. We need a footman for the holiday parties." William stared at his sister. Outside, snow had begun to fall, fat flakes drifting down like ash from a distant fire. Mother would have a stroke. Mother doesn't need to know. Gerald can arrange it. Gerald was the estate's head butler, a man who'd served their family for 30 years and possessed the discretion of a priest in a confessional. Put on a uniform, keep your head down, and watch how your future bride treats the help. You'll know everything you need to know in a week. It was reckless. It was beneath his station. It was potentially humiliating if discovered. It was the only honest thing William could think to do. 3 days later, he stood in the servants' quarters wearing the charcoal-grey uniform of an Ashford Manor footman. Black tie, white gloves, brass buttons polished to mirrors. Gerald had coached him on posture, on proper service, on the invisible choreography that made wealthy households run smoothly. They'd crafted a backstory, William Hayes, recently hired, distant cousin of one of the kitchen staff, a young man trying to earn his way in the world. "Remember," Gerald said, adjusting William's collar with practiced efficiency, "you are furniture. You anticipate needs before they're spoken. You never meet eyes unless directly addressed. And for God's sake, mind your accent. You're supposed to be from Richmond, not Princeton." Catherine arrived that afternoon with her mother, Eleanor, and her younger brother, Christopher. William watched from the entrance hall as Gerald received their coats, as his own mother swept down the staircase in a cloud of Chanel No. 5 to embrace Eleanor, like they were sisters separated by war rather than neighbours who'd lunched together last Thursday. Catherine wore a cream-coloured suit with a mink collar, her hair pinned in an elegant chignon. She looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine, polished, perfect, and utterly remote. "William, darling." She kissed his cheek, her lips barely grazing skin. "I hope you don't mind, but Mother insisted on coming along to discuss the wedding preparations. There's so much still to finalize." "Of course." William, the real William, the one who was supposed to be the groom, played his part. "Whatever you need." She didn't look at him when she spoke. Her attention was already drifting toward the drawing room where the mothers had disappeared, toward the schedule and social obligations that structured her life like scaffolding around a building under construction. "Hayes!" Gerald's voice was quiet but commanding. "See to the luggage, please. Miss Hartwell's belongings go in the rose room, Mrs. Hartwell's in the blue room." "Yes, sir." William kept his eyes down, reached for Catherine's leather suitcase. Her hand shot out, grabbing his wrist. "Careful with that. It's Italian leather and cost more than you make in 6 months." The words were casual, thoughtless. She wasn't being cruel, just stating what she believed to be fact. To her, he was furniture, and furniture didn't have feelings about being insulted. William felt something cold settle in his chest. "Yes, miss. I'll be very careful." She'd already turned away, following the sound of her mother's laughter into the warmth of the drawing room. William carried her suitcase up the servants' stairs, his footsteps silent on carpet that had been imported from Brussels before he was born. Margaret found him in the second-floor hallway. "Well?" "It's been 20 minutes. And I'm beginning to understand why people turn to drink." She laughed, but there was sympathy in it. "Give her a chance, Will. People behave differently in different contexts. Maybe she's just nervous." But over the next 2 days, William saw no evidence of nerves. He saw Catherine Hartwell in her natural habitat, moving through the manor with the confidence of someone who'd been preparing for this role her entire life. She discussed wedding details with military precision, flowers, seating arrangements, the precise wording of thank-you notes. She played piano in the music room, Chopin etudes executed flawlessly, technically perfect and emotionally hollow, and she was consistently, casually dismissive of the staff. Not cruel, never overtly unkind, but there was a carelessness to how she moved through spaces they occupied, as if they were paintings on walls rather than people with thoughts and lives. She left wet towels on bathroom floors for housekeepers to collect. She rang for service and then got annoyed when someone didn't appear instantly. She never said thank you. William, carrying trays and serving drinks and blending into wallpaper, watched it all. On the third evening, a cocktail party was held for wedding guests arriving early. Cousins from Connecticut, business associates from New York, friends from Catherine's Radcliffe days. William circulated with champagne, invisible in his grey uniform, and listened to her laugh at jokes that weren't funny, watched her touch men's arms in that practiced way that suggested interest without promising anything. "She's good at this," Christopher Hartwell said quietly. He'd cornered William near the bar, and William realized with a start that Catherine's younger brother was drunk. At 23, Christopher had the look of someone who'd peaked in prep school and was now coasting on fumes, red-rimmed eyes, hands that shook slightly when he reached for his scotch. "The performance, I mean. Our sister. She could sell refrigerators to Eskimos. "Sir?" William kept his voice neutral. "Don't sir me, Hayes. I'm nobody important." Christopher swirled his drink, ice cubes clinking against crystal. "You know what Father told her when she graduated? That her education was insurance, in case the marriage didn't take. Catherine Hartwell, Radcliffe graduate, with a degree she'll never use because her real job is being William Ashford's wife. Maybe she wants that," William offered carefully. Christopher snorted. "Maybe. Or maybe she's just good at wanting what she's supposed to want. Hard to tell the difference after a while." He drained his glass, set it down with too much force. "Take care of her, will you? Once you marry in, someone should." He weaved away before William could respond, leaving behind the smell of expensive whiskey and profound sadness. The party wound down near midnight. William helped Gerald clear glasses, collected abandoned cocktail napkins, reset the drawing room for breakfast. His feet ached, his shoulders were tight from maintaining perfect posture. And his doubts had crystallized into something harder and more painful, the certainty that he was about to marry a stranger who would never see him clearly, even if he stood directly in front of her. He was heading toward the servants' stairs when he heard crying. The sound came from the library, soft, muffled, the kind of crying someone does when they don't want to be caught. William hesitated, then pushed the door open gently. Catherine sat curled in his father's leather chair, still in her cocktail dress. Mascara tracked down her cheeks in dark rivers. She looked up when he entered, and for a moment something raw and real flickered across her face before the mask slammed back into place. "Get out," she said, but her voice cracked on the words. William should have left. A footman would have left. Instead, he stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "Are you all right, miss?" "I said get out." She wiped at her face with the back of her hand, smearing the mascara worse. "This is none of your business." "No, miss, but you're upset." "I'm fine." The words were automatic, defensive. Then, as if the weight of them was too much to carry alone, she crumpled slightly. "I'm getting married in 11 days. That's usually considered a happy occasion." She laughed, bitter and sharp. "Is it? When you're marrying someone you barely know, when your whole life is just a series of obligations you didn't choose." Her eyes met his, and William saw something he'd never expected. Fear. What if I'm making a terrible mistake? What if he's making one? William's throat felt tight. "Why are you marrying him then?" "Because it's what everyone expects, because the Hartwells have been on the verge of bankruptcy for 5 years, and the Ashfords need respectability they've been buying for 3 generations. Because I'm 26 and unmarried, which in my mother's world makes me practically a spinster." She pulled her knees up to her chest, suddenly looking much younger than 26. "Because I don't know how to want anything else." The confession hung in the air between them, honest and devastating. "Have you told him any of this?" William asked quietly. Catherine shook her head. "How could I? We're never alone, and when we are, we talk about seating charts and honeymoon destinations, and which silver pattern to register for. Surface things, safe things." She looked at him, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time since he'd put on the uniform. "Do you think I'm terrible?" "No, miss, I think you're honest." "Honest?" She tested the word like it was foreign. "When was the last time anyone in my position was allowed to be honest?" She stood abruptly, smoothing her dress, rebuilding her armor. "This conversation never happened. If you tell anyone—" "I won't." William felt something shift inside him, a crack in the foundation of his assumptions. "Your secret's safe." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded and slipped out of the library like a ghost. William stood alone among his father's books, surrounded by the weight of money and expectation, and wondered if he'd just glimpsed the real Catherine Hartwell, or simply a different kind of performance. The next morning brought chaos. The manor was preparing for the largest event of the season, a pre-wedding celebration with over 100 guests, a multi-course dinner, dancing in the ballroom, and enough social pressure to crush diamonds into dust. The staff moved in coordinated frenzy, and William found himself stationed in the main hall, responsible for taking coats and directing guests. Catherine appeared mid-morning in riding clothes, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Without makeup, she looked softer, more approachable. She was heading toward the stables when she nearly collided with William in the hallway. "Sorry," she said automatically, then registered who he was. A flush crept up her neck. "About last night." "Already forgotten, miss." Relief flickered across her face. "Thank you." She hesitated, then added quietly, "You were kind. That's not something I'm used to." Before William could respond, Eleanor Hartwell's voice cut through the hall like a knife through silk. "Catherine, we have fittings in 20 minutes. Why are you dressed like a stable hand?" The softness vanished. Catherine's spine straightened, her expression smoothed into practiced pleasantness. "Coming, mother." She brushed past William without another glance, and he watched her go, watched her fold herself back into the shape her mother required. Margaret found him before lunch, looking troubled. "We have a problem." "Just one." "Aunt Beatrice arrived early. She's asking questions about the new footman, thinks you look familiar." Beatrice was their father's sister, a sharp-eyed woman who forgot nothing and forgave less. "You need to be careful." William spent the afternoon being very careful, which mostly meant avoiding Beatrice while serving lunch, clearing plates, and trying not to think about Catherine's confession in the library. She'd been honest with him, truly honest, in a way she apparently couldn't be with her fiancé. The real William, him. The evening party was elaborate torture. William stood at attention while wearing white gloves in an overheated ballroom, surrounded by people he'd known his entire life, all of whom looked through him like he was transparent. He watched Catherine dance with his own mother's cousin Edward, watched her smile and laugh, and play the role of delighted bride-to-be with Tony Award-worthy skill. But during a break between courses, he found her on the terrace, standing alone in the December cold without a coat. "Miss, you'll freeze." She didn't turn around. Maybe that would be better than going back in there. William shrugged out of his uniform jacket and draped it over her shoulders. She startled at the gesture, then pulled the jacket tighter around herself. "You're going to get in trouble," she said. "Probably." He stood beside her, both of them looking out at the dark gardens, at frost glittering on bare branches like scattered diamonds. "Why do you do it?" "Do what? Pretend to be someone you're not?" She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, "Because the real me isn't good enough. The real me is scared and uncertain and doesn't know how to be the person everyone needs me to be." Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "The real me doesn't want this life at all." William's heart hammered against his ribs. "What do you want?" "I used to want to teach. History, maybe, or literature. I wanted to work in a library, surrounded by books and quiet. I wanted—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "It doesn't matter what I wanted. It matters what's expected. It should matter what you want." She turned to look at him then, and in the moonlight she was breathtaking, not because of her careful beauty, but because of the vulnerability in her eyes, the desperate hope that someone might understand. "Who are you, really, Hayes?" The question hung between them like a held breath. William could tell her, should tell her. But before he could find the words, Christopher stumbled onto the terrace, drunk again, and Catherine's walls snapped back into place. She returned William's jacket, thanked him coolly, and guided her brother back inside, leaving William alone in the cold. The following day was Sunday. Most of the house slept late, recovering from the party. William was polishing silver in the butler's pantry when Gerald appeared, looking grave. "We need to talk." the butler said quietly. In private. They went to Gerald's small office off the kitchen. Gerald closed the door, then turned to face William with an expression somewhere between sympathy and disappointment. Beatrice knows. William's stomach dropped. How? Your hands. You polish silver like someone who's never done it before because you haven't. And last night at dinner you served from the wrong side twice. Small mistakes, but Beatrice notices everything. Gerald sat heavily in his chair. She's confronted me. She knows you're not really a footman, though she hasn't guessed you're William yet. She thinks you're some kind of journalist doing an exposé on wealthy families. Christ. William ran a hand through his hair, forgetting to maintain his footman posture. What did you tell her? That I'd handle it. But, sir, this charade needs to end. If she figures out the truth, or if anyone else does, the scandal could destroy the wedding, the family's reputation, everything. I know. William felt the walls of his father's expectations closing in again. I just needed to know who she really was. And do you? William thought of Catherine crying in the library, of her confession on the terrace, of the fear and longing in her voice when she talked about the life she'd never have. I'm beginning to... Is that knowledge worth the cost if this all falls apart? Before William could answer, raised voices erupted from upstairs, Eleanor Hartwell's imperious tone clashing with Catherine's, which William had never heard raised before. He took the servants' stairs 2 at a time, Gerald calling after him to stop, to remember his place. But William was already past remembering. He burst into the second-floor hallway to find Eleanor gripping Catherine's arm hard enough to leave marks, her face twisted with rage. You will not embarrass this family, Eleanor hissed. You will smile and nod and marry that man and save us from ruin. Do you understand? I don't love him. The words tore out of Catherine like they'd been trapped for years. I don't even know him. Love is a luxury people like us cannot afford. Your father's investments have failed. We're mortgaged to the breaking point. The Ashford money is the only thing standing between us and complete disgrace. Eleanor shook her daughter hard. You will do your duty, Catherine. You will let her go. William's voice cut through the hallway like a whip crack. Both women turned to stare at him. Eleanor's expression shifted from rage to outrage. How dare you address me, you presumptuous... I said let her go. Something in his tone, the authority he'd been trained since birth to wield, made Eleanor release Catherine's arm. The change in William's bearing was unmistakable. He no longer stood like a servant. He stood like someone who owned the ground beneath his feet. Catherine's eyes widened with dawning realization. Oh my God! Catherine, you're him! Her voice was barely a whisper. You're William. You've been... this whole time. You've been... The color drained from her face. She looked between him and her mother, at the uniformed man who'd been kind to her, who'd listened to her confessions, who'd seen her cry and held her secrets. The betrayal in her eyes was a physical blow. You lied to me, she breathed. I needed to know who you really were. So you humiliated me, made a fool of me, let me pour my heart out to someone I thought was safe? Her voice rose, sharp with hurt and fury. What kind of man does that? The kind who was about to marry a stranger, William shot back. You said it yourself. We don't know each other. Every interaction we've had has been performed for an audience. I needed to see the real you. So you could what? Test me, judge me, see if I was good enough to be your wife. Catherine's hands shook. I told you things I've never told anyone. I trusted you. And I'm grateful. You're grateful. She laughed, a terrible sound. I bared my soul to a servant because I thought he was someone who couldn't hurt me with the information. But you're not a servant. You're the man who holds my entire future in his hands. And now you know every weak, desperate thought I've ever had. Eleanor had recovered from her shock. This is outrageous. I'm calling off the wedding immediately. The Ashfords can... No. Catherine's voice was suddenly steel. "We're not calling off anything." William stared at her. "Catherine, you wanted to test me? To see who I really am?" She met his eyes, and the vulnerability he'd seen on the terrace was gone, replaced by something cold and hard as diamonds. "Fine. Here's who I really am. I'm a woman who understands that survival matters more than dignity. My family needs this marriage. Your family needs this marriage, so we'll go through with it. You can't possibly want that now. What I want hasn't mattered for 26 years. Why should it start now?" She turned to her mother. "Tell everyone there was a minor disagreement, but it's resolved. The wedding proceeds as planned." Eleanor looked between them, calculating. "Catherine, if you're certain, I'm certain." Catherine's gaze never left William's face. "After all, what's one more performance? I've been preparing for this role my whole life." She swept past him, spine rigid, leaving William standing in the hallway with the ruins of something he hadn't even known he'd wanted until it was destroyed. Margaret found him an hour later in the stables, still wearing half his footman uniform, sitting in the tack room among leather and horse smell and the ghost of his own stupidity. "You're an idiot," she said, not unkindly. "I know. She's right to be furious with you. I know that too." Margaret sat beside him on a trunk that had belonged to their grandfather. Outside, horses moved in their stalls, peaceful and uncomplicated. "What did you think would happen, Will? That you'd spy on her, she'd never find out, and you'd marry her with this secret knowledge hanging between you forever? I thought I'd understand her better, make a better choice. You thought you could control the situation, just like Father always did." Margaret's voice was gentle but firm. "But people aren't investments to be researched, Will. Relationships aren't mergers. You can't know someone by observing them like they're specimens under glass. Then how do you know them? You ask, you trust, you take the risk of being hurt." She stood, brushing hay from her slacks. "The question is, what are you going to do now?" William spent the night thinking. By morning, he had something resembling a plan. Though calling it that was generous, it was more a desperate hope wrapped in action. He found Catherine in the music room playing Chopin again. But this time, the notes carried emotion, anger and hurt pouring through her fingers onto the keys. She didn't stop playing when he entered. "If you're here to apologize again, save your breath. I've already accepted 3 of them. They don't change anything." "I'm not here to apologize." William closed the door behind him. "I'm here to call off the wedding." Her hands crashed down on the keys in a discordant clash. She spun on the bench to face him. "What? You were right. What I did was unforgivable. I treated you like an experiment, violated your trust, and put you in an impossible position." William stayed by the door, giving her space. "But more than that, you deserve better than a marriage built on deception and obligation. You deserve someone who sees you, Catherine. All of you. The scared parts and the brave parts and the parts that want to teach history in a quiet library somewhere. We can't call it off. My family. I'll make sure your family is taken care of. I can't undo what I did, but I can do that. Trust funds, paid mortgages, whatever they need. No strings attached." He met her eyes. "You shouldn't have to sacrifice your life to save theirs." Catherine stood slowly, crossing the room until she stood directly in front of him. "And what do you get out of this? The satisfaction of playing hero after playing villain. I get to know that I did one honest thing in this whole mess." She studied his face for a long moment. "You're serious?" "Completely. You'd really let me go? Cancel the wedding, face the social consequences, disappoint your mother and mine, disrupt all the careful plans?" Her voice was softer now, uncertain. "Why? Because those nights when I was invisible, when you didn't know who I was, I saw someone extraordinary, someone trapped in a cage made of other people's expectations. And I can't be another bar in that cage, Catherine. I won't be." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. "You're an idiot." So my sister tells me. A complete, absolute idiot who doesn't understand anything. She shook her head, and now the tears fell freely. Because what you saw in the library and on the terrace, that wasn't me being fake. That was me being real. For the first time in years, I was honest with someone. It felt... She struggled for words. It felt like breathing after holding my breath my whole life. Catherine, let me finish. She wiped at her tears impatiently. Yes, you lied about who you were. Yes, it was wrong and hurtful, and I'm still furious about it. But you know what else you did? You listened. You saw me, actually saw me, when I'd spent years being invisible while standing in plain sight. You asked what I wanted and acted like my answer mattered. William felt his heart hammering. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't want you to call off the wedding. She took a shaky breath. I want you to court me properly, starting now, starting over, starting honest. I want to know who you really are, the way you know who I really am. And then, if we still want to, if we both choose it, we get married. We only have a week. Then we'll pack a lot of honesty into 7 days. She managed a smile, watery but real. Unless you don't want to, unless what you saw when you were playing Footman convinced you I'm not worth the trouble. William laughed, the sound surprised out of him. Catherine, you're the most remarkable person I've ever met. The trouble isn't a problem. I'm just not sure I deserve... Don't. She pressed a finger to his lips. Don't put me on a pedestal. That's just another cage. We start as equals or we don't start at all. Equals, William agreed. Starting now. Starting now, she echoed. Then, quieter. Tell me something true. Something the real William Ashford has never told anyone. He thought for a moment, then spoke carefully. I hate the business. The mills, the boards, the endless meetings about profit margins and stock dividends. I inherited my father's empire, and I feel like I'm suffocating in someone else's dream. He paused. I wanted to be an architect. Design buildings, create spaces where people could live and work and feel human. But my father said architecture was a hobby, not a profession for an Ashford. Catherine's expression softened. So we're both trapped in lives we didn't choose. Maybe, or maybe we can choose differently. William offered his hand. Want to find out? She took it. Her palm was warm, her grip firm. Where do we start? How about a walk? No servants, no mothers, no audience, just us. They bundled into coats and scarves and walked the grounds of Ashford Manor while snow fell gently around them. And they talked, really talked, for the first time since the charade began. William told her about the pressure of expectations, about his sister's rebellion and his own quieter form of surrender. Catherine told him about Radcliffe, about the history degree she'd loved earning and never expected to use, about the small rebellions she'd staged in her own mind while her body went through the motions her mother orchestrated. Did you mean it? She asked as they walked past the frozen pond. About taking care of my family financially? Yes. Why? Because their debt isn't your responsibility, and because you shouldn't have to marry for money in 1968. That's supposed to be changing. Mum, she laughed, you haven't met my mother. I've met your mother. She's terrifying. William smiled. But she doesn't get to write your story, Catherine. Only you do. They walked until their noses were red and the light was fading, until Catherine's teeth chattered and William's ears burned with cold. Back at the manor, Margaret intercepted them at the door, looking relieved. There you are. Beatrice is leaving, thank God. But she wants to speak to you, Will. Both of you. Beatrice Ashford sat in the library like a queen on a throne, ramrod straight in her travelling suit, pearls at her throat and judgment in her eyes. She studied them as they entered. William, still in half his footman uniform, Catherine with snow melting in her hair. Sit, Beatrice commanded. They sat. I won't ask what lunacy possessed you to masquerade as staff. Beatrice said to William. "I'm sure you had your reasons, however misguided. What I want to know is this. Do you intend to marry this girl?" William glanced at Catherine, who nodded slightly. "Yes, ma'am, if she'll have me." "And you?" Beatrice turned her sharp gaze to Catherine. "Do you want to marry my nephew, or are you simply doing what's expected?" The question hung in the air. Catherine could lie, could retreat behind polite deflection. Instead, she straightened her spine and met Beatrice's eyes directly. "I don't know yet. We're still figuring that out." Beatrice's eyebrows rose. "Honest answer. I respect that." She stood, gathering her gloves. "Then here's my advice. Figure it out quickly, and figure it out honestly. This family has had enough marriages of convenience. They're breeding grounds for misery." She paused at the door. "But if you do marry, if you choose each other, make sure it's for the right reasons. Love isn't enough. You need respect, trust, and the courage to keep choosing each other when it gets hard. Which it will." After she left, Catherine turned to William. "Your aunt is remarkable. She divorced her husband in 1943. The family pretended he died in the war, but really, he was an alcoholic who couldn't keep his hands to himself." Beatrice walked away with nothing but her dignity and rebuilt her entire life. William smiled. "She's my hero. I can see why." Over the next few days, they fell into a pattern. Mornings were for the wedding preparations that couldn't be avoided. Tastings, final fittings, arrangements, and logistics. But afternoons and evenings belonged to them. They drove into Washington, walked the National Mall, had dinner at small restaurants where no one knew them. They talked about books and politics, about the war in Vietnam and the protests that were tearing the country apart, about whether they'd have children and what kind of parents they might be. Christopher joined them for dinner one night, sober for once, and Catherine held her brother's hand across the table while he talked about wanting to be a photographer, about the portfolio he'd been building in secret because their father thought it was frivolous. "Show him," Catherine urged William. Christopher was reluctant, but eventually he retrieved his portfolio from his car, black and white photographs of Washington, of ordinary people in extraordinary moments. A street musician lost in his music, a child's first snow, an elderly couple holding hands on a park bench. "These are brilliant," William said, and meant it. "You have a real gift." "Father doesn't think so." "Your father's opinion isn't the only one that matters," Catherine said gently. "What do you think, Chris?" Christopher looked at his sister like she'd spoken a foreign language. "What do I think?" "Yes. What do you want?" He was quiet for a long time. Then, "I want to apply to art school, Corcoran maybe, or Arisd. I want to take pictures that matter." "Then you should," William said. "I can help with applications, recommendations, whatever you need." "Why would you do that?" "Because talent shouldn't be wasted, and because your sister loves you, and I'm trying to deserve her." William looked at Catherine. "That means caring about the people she cares about." Christopher left that night with something William had rarely seen on his face: hope. 5 days before the wedding, Catherine took William to the Library of Congress. They spent hours wandering the reading room, surrounded by books and quiet, by knowledge accumulated over centuries. "This is what I wanted," Catherine said softly, running her hand along leather-bound spines. "To work somewhere like this. To be surrounded by stories and information, to help people find what they're looking for. You still could. I'm about to be Mrs. William Ashford III. That comes with responsibilities. It also comes with resources." William turned to face her. "Catherine, what if we did things differently? What if instead of you fitting into my life, we built a life together? One where you could work if you wanted to, where I could explore architecture, where we didn't just inherit our parents' world but created our own." People would talk. Let them talk. She smiled, but there was sadness in it. You make it sound so simple. It won't be simple. It'll be hard and complicated, and we'll probably fail as often as we succeed. William took her hands, but at least we'd be failing on our own terms. That night, back at the manor, Eleanor Hartwell cornered Catherine in the hallway. William watched from the stairs, ready to intervene if needed. "I've heard rumors," Eleanor said coldly, "about you and William spending unchaperoned time together. About him making promises regarding your family's finances. They're not rumors, Mother, they're facts. Catherine, I won't have you embarrassing—" "No." Catherine's voice was quiet, but firm. "You won't have me embarrassing you. That's what you mean. But here's the thing, Mother. I'm done living my life to prevent your embarrassment. I'm marrying William because I'm choosing to, not because you need me to. And if that bothers you, you don't have to attend the wedding." Eleanor's face went white. "You ungrateful." "I'm grateful for the opportunities you've given me, for the education, the experiences, all of it. But I'm also done pretending to be someone I'm not just to make you comfortable." Catherine's voice cracked slightly. "I love you, Mother, but I need you to let me love you while also living my own life." William saw Eleanor's expression shift, saw her struggle between anger and something deeper, fear, maybe, or grief, for the daughter who was finally pulling away. "I don't know how to do that," Eleanor whispered. "Neither do I," Catherine admitted, "but we'll figure it out." They didn't embrace. Eleanor Hartwell wasn't built for easy affection, but she nodded once, sharply, and retreated down the hallway with something resembling dignity intact. William came down the stairs slowly. "You were incredible." Catherine was shaking. "I think I'm going to be sick." "You stood up to her." "I stood up to her," Catherine repeated, like she was testing the words. Then she started laughing, a little hysterical, but genuine. "Oh, God, I really did. I stood up to Eleanor Hartwell and survived. You did more than survive." William pulled her close, felt her trembling against him. "You were magnificent." 2 days before the wedding, William took Catherine to an empty lot he'd purchased 6 months earlier in Arlington. It was nothing much, bare ground, some trees, a view of the Potomac. "I bought this after my father died," he said. "I thought maybe someday I'd build something here, a house maybe, something I designed myself, not inherited." "What would you build?" "I don't know. Something with light, with windows that let you see the seasons change, with spaces that feel human-sized, not like monuments to wealth." He turned to her. "Maybe something with a library, a real one, floor-to-ceiling books, the kind of space where someone could lose themselves in stories." Catherine's eyes were bright. "You'd do that? I'd like to try if you'd help me. You understand books better than I do. You'd know what kind of space they need. We could design it together, if you wanted to." She looked out at the empty lot, at the bare ground where something new could grow. "Do you know what you're offering me? A partnership. A real one." "I'm offering you a choice," William corrected. "You don't have to say yes." "What if I want to?" She turned to face him. "What if I choose you, William? Not because I have to, not because my family needs me to, but because these last few days have been the happiest I've ever been. What if I choose this?" William felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Then I'd say I'm the luckiest man alive." "Even though I'm still angry about the Footman thing?" "Even though you're still angry about the Footman thing?" She laughed, then sobered. "I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me we'll keep being honest, even when it's hard, even when we're scared. Promise me we won't fall into the trap of performing for each other." Her voice was fierce. "Promise me this is real." "I promise." William took both her hands. Catherine Hartwell, I choose you, not because of your family or mine, not because of money or obligation or social expectations. I choose you because you're brilliant and brave and real, because you make me want to be better, because I—" He stopped, the words caught in his throat. "Because you what?" she whispered. "Because I'm falling in love with you, the real you. The woman who wants to work in libraries and stand up to her mother and doesn't know how to want things for herself. That's who I'm falling in love with." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You can't know that. We've only really known each other for a week." "Then ask me again in a year, and the year after that, and every year until you believe me." She kissed him then, standing on bare ground in Arlington, with the December wind cold around them. And it was nothing like the polite kisses they'd exchanged for show at parties. It was raw and real and full of promise. The wedding day dawned clear and cold. The manor was transformed into something out of a fairy tale. White roses and candlelight, crystal and silver, 300 guests dressed in their finest. Catherine wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her, and she looked like something out of a dream. But William, standing at the altar, didn't see the dress or the carefully arranged roses or the society photographer capturing every moment. He saw Catherine, the woman who'd cried in the library and been honest on terraces, who'd stood up to her mother and chosen her own path. He saw his partner, his equal, his choice. The ceremony was traditional, vows spoken in the Episcopal Church, where 4 generations of Ashfords had married, words about honour and cherish and all the days of their lives. But when Catherine looked at William and said, "I do," he heard beneath the ritual, "I choose you." And when William slipped the ring on her finger, he whispered, "I choose you too." At the reception, they danced their first dance to Sinatra, while 300 people watched and applauded. But during the third dance, Christopher cut in, taking his sister's hand. "Thank you," he said quietly as they swayed to the music. "For what?" "For showing me it's possible, to stand up, to choose something different." He smiled. "I applied to RISD yesterday. William wrote me a recommendation letter. It was really kind." Catherine looked over at her new husband, who was dancing with Margaret, both of them laughing at something. "He's a good man. He loves you." "I know," as she squeezed Christopher's hand. "And I love him. That's the terrifying part." "Why is love terrifying?" "Because it means I have something to lose." Catherine met her brother's eyes. "But it also means I have something worth fighting for." Later, when the reception was winding down and most guests had left, Catherine found William on the same terrace where she'd confessed her fears to a footman who wasn't really a footman at all. "Having regrets?" William asked, offering her his jacket against the cold. "Only that I wasted so much time being who everyone else needed me to be." She leaned against him, and he wrapped his arms around her. "But not about this. Not about us." "Good. Because I fully intend to spend the next 50 years making sure you never regret choosing me." 50 years. At least. Maybe more if medical science cooperates. She laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Below them, the lights of Fairfax County spread out like scattered stars. Above them, the real stars wheeled in their ancient patterns. And between those points of light, 2 people who'd found each other through deception and discovered truth stood together and chose to keep choosing. "William," Catherine said softly. "Yes." "Thank you for being an idiot and dressing up as a footman." "Really?" "Really. Because if you hadn't, we might have gone through with the original plan. Married as strangers, stayed strangers forever." She turned in his arms to face him. "I would have been comfortable, safe, miserable. And now? Now I'm terrified and uncertain and completely in love with you." She smiled. "It's a much better deal." They went inside together as the first snow of the evening began to fall, walking into a future they'd built themselves, brick by honest brick, choice by careful choice. Behind them, Ashford Manor stood as it had for generations, filled with ghosts of obligations and expectations. But ahead of them was something new, a life they'd designed together, with windows that let in light and spaces built for two people learning to see each other clearly. It wouldn't be easy, change never was, but it would be real. And in the end, that was worth everything.